Ciao ragazzi e benvenuti ad un nuovo episodio del Fitfan Podcast. L'ospite di quest'oggi è Matthew Ibrahim, co-proprietario della TD Edwards Edge di Boston. Dottorando nel programma di Human e Sport Performance presso la Rocky Mountain University, Matthew è anche professore aggiunto di Scienze Motorie presso l'Endicott College e l'Università di Maryville. Relatore di fama internazionale, ha tenuto presentazioni presso la sede centrale di Google, l'Università di Stanford, Equinox e la MBSC di MIke Boyle. I suoi articoli, inoltre, sono stati inseriti in alcune delle più grandi pubblicazioni mondiali, come Men's Health e Men's Fitness. Con Matthew abbiamo parlato di comunicazione, del suo approccio al core training, di isometria e ci ha inoltre raccontato come ha riempito le sue giornate in questi mesi di lockdown. Buon ascolto e a più tardi.
Hello there, Matthew Ibrahim. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Welcome to the FitFam podcast. We really appreciate you being here, man.
Fabrizio, man, I appreciate you having me on. You know, FitFam, I love you guys. Coach T, Luca, the whole team, and you pronounced my last name perfectly, and that never really happened. So I really appreciate that. But yeah, I'm excited to be on, and I'm thankful for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, man. Could you just start off by introducing a little bit yourself, and then we'll kind of go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I co-own the TD Athletes Edge. It's a private training facility in Boston. It's we train athletes from all different backgrounds, ages, abilities. We have a lot of endurance athletes, high school athletes, adult population, Gen Pop. So it's really a wide variety. But in addition to being the co-owner, I'm also the director of strength and conditioning and the internship coordinator. So I see and talk to a lot of people on a daily basis, which I'm sure you can tell I don't mind doing. I love interacting and helping people and supporting and being a coach. On the side, I'm also in academia. So I'm an adjunct professor at two different universities in exercise science, Maryville University, as well as Endicott College. And I just started a couple days ago my PhD, so my doctoral program in human and sport performance. So I do a bit of everything, and I also enjoy interacting on social media and putting out educational content on Instagram and writing blogs and articles. So any way that I can share knowledge but also learn at the same time is really something that I enjoy doing.
And I was reading your CV earlier, and I mean that's one heck of a pedigree for such a young coach. So you had gained quite a vast array of experiences in the sports rehab realm as well, right?
Yeah, I've been lucky. So early on, like anyone, I want in this field as a strength coach, a performance coach, a fitness professional, I wanted to become great at training and helping people perform at higher levels. What I realized along the way was that I should probably learn more about the rehabilitation and sports medicine side. Unfortunately, I never got into doctor of PT or doctor of physical therapy school to become a physio or a physical therapist. However, I was lucky because as a strength coach, I worked in a lot of sports rehab and clinical settings. So I would sit in on the exams and understand some of the basic principles of movement, human movement, and how to break things down, and then utilize those skills and strategies as a strength coach to simplify things. Also, from a communication standpoint, learning how to take in the value of the athlete or the patient or the client that you're working with, actually listening to them, using listening skills and to build trust and buy-in, and then take those skills as a strength coach and coach, right? And so it has really taught me to be a much more effective coach, taking some of the rehab understandings. I also got my license in massage therapy. I did that for a year to help with the sports rehab team. But ultimately, I'm a coach at heart. I like to coach, teach, and educate. And so coaching is my big thing. And being a strength coach is really valuable to me because I'm sure, like yourself, Fabrizio, we're seeing a lot of new research and literature and content come out in our field. Yes, there's a lot of, movement-based stuff like this exercise, that exercise, which one's better for evidence-based practice. That's great. But I also think people like, Brett Bartholomew, Nick Winkelman, they're bringing to light, these guys among many others are bringing to light the side of communication, language, words, using proper words and language of communication to ultimately help your athletes, whether it's helping them understand what you're saying from a cueing standpoint or building buy-in and trust, or allowing them to buy into the process. So I'm infatuated with the communication process. And so I'm actually in the middle of having to, put together my dissertation thoughts for the PhD. It's going to be a 3 or 4 year process. So by no means am I even remotely close to starting, but I'm someone I'm obsessed with the hamstrings, Nordic hamstring curls, hamstring injury reduction and increased performance. So there's that part that I want to, obviously dig a bit deeper into the research as my dissertation. But I understand that communication is the number one thing. It's the foundation that everything is built on. So I'm at a crossroads right now. Do I do more hamstring injury reduction and increased performance? Or do I do communication, language, and wording in the coaching realm? Or do I combine the two? So I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, but I think I might just figure out a way to combine the two and hopefully be sneaky about it. We'll see.
I already know you're going to be able to make like a blend of the two because...
Hopefully.
So, Matthew, I just wanted to know, what were some of the biggest challenges you found yourself facing when first starting out in the fitness industry? Any anecdote you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, great question, Fabrizio. I'm a very black and white, objective person when looking at information. So in some ways I can be like very robotic. And if you, like any coach, any strength coach for the most part, they have this robotic nature about them. They're like, okay, it's gotta be, 3 inches down. The toe goes to the left, the knee goes here, the hips go there, the back. It's like, yes, just like when you study anatomy and physiology in undergrad, you have to have some memorization skills and this like robotic, like structured approach. It definitely serves its merit at certain points. However, you can't do that all the time. And so it's almost like I failed so many times in terms of my communication with people. And I was like, I'm getting frustrated. Why aren't they understanding what I'm saying? Why don't they get what I'm trying to say? I'm saying it simply to them. But over time you realize, look, not everyone perceives and understands and learns at the same pace or in the same way. Everyone's different. So when I began to realize after making so many mistakes that like Fabrizio, similar to how you and I and any coach would write individualized training programs, you have to speak, communicate, and use language in an individualized approach. And so when I began to understand that, I was like, okay, just simplify things. Stop thinking so much. Use the science, but also use the human elements. So instead of saying, Fabrizio, get your feet here, put your back here, we're going to do a goblet squat. Yo, Fabrizio, grab that dumbbell, go down and up. It's like, boom, like you realize that there are so many ways to get the job done. It doesn't have to always be, this one lane approach. It can be many approaches as long as each approach has the same outcome or a similar outcome to breed results. So, in terms of failures and like anecdotal mistakes, I mean, there were times where I was like, hey, ex-client, like, let's do this. And like, they're looking at me like I have 5 heads. They're confused. They're perplexed. They're just not getting it, which, that's one of the reasons why I began teaching with my friend Zach, the Hip Hinge one-on-one workshop, which we no longer teach anymore. But the thought process was, how do we simplify a movement that is so obscure and confusing to a lot of people? Because if I say, Fabrizio, show me a squat, and you've never been into a gym your entire life, you would probably do something closely related to a squat. Why? Because you do things and you perform functions and daily activities that are squat related, like, sit down on the toilet or, sit down on the chair or go into your car. Whereas it's not quite often that you do a hip hinge or a deadlift pattern. So teaching that was fun. We learned a lot, but taken from those learnings, there have been many times where I've made failures with my communication piece and not understanding the end user. The end user is the athlete, the client, the patient, the human that you're working with. So what I've tried to do in the past 3 to 4 years is, in addition to the master's degree and the PhD and in academia, is I'm trying to learn you better. Like you being the general you, like Fabrizio, I want to understand how you learn. I want to understand how you process things, how you can understand things. And then as a coach, I can read you better. So I like to think that when I write the training program, that I'm writing it in my mind during each training session that I see you train. So let me break that down. So Fabrizio's coming in twice a week for a 4-week training program. Call it one phase. He has 8 sessions. Every time I see Fabrizio, I get one more little layer of knowledge related to any exercise that I program for him, whether it's a core exercise, upper body, horizontal push or pull or press or squat or deadlift, whatever. So I'm taking these bits of knowledge and these layers and I'm kind of storing them away so that when I write your program, I'm a visual learner. So I visually say, oh, yep, I remember like it was about 2 weeks ago, his ankle didn't feel good in the bottom of the squat. Let me do this instead to see if that responds better next phase. So I'm big on mental imagery and visual learning, and that helps me. That's the way I learn best is I have to see, touch, feel. And again, you learn that over time. I didn't know that when I was 20, 25. I'm 31 right now. So, it takes time to learn. So, and I've been doing this for 12 years. So it's been a fun learning process, but it all comes down to, in my opinion, understanding who you're working with, relating to them, showing vulnerability. Vulnerability to me is a strength. It says to Fabrizio, hey, look, I'm in the same, I'm with you. I'm with you, bro. Like, I'm not above you and you're below. No, like we're on the same level. I'm working with you. You can relate to me. I can relate to you. There's trust. There's vulnerability. And then we can forge a path for that coach to athlete relationship to build.
Yeah. And that's ultimately the key to be successful in our industry. I mean, no matter how knowledgeable you are, if you cannot get that message across, you're never going to be successful with your clients or athletes. Never. Because we have human beings in front of us, not robots or anything like that.
That's the thing, Fabrizio. Like,
yeah, that's hard to grasp.
It is because when in academia and school and education and certifications and courses, you're looking at stuff on paper. But what you need to realize is, or what we all need to realize is that the variable that changes the most is the human being in front of us. And we know that change is really the only constant. So we need to adapt to the athlete the same way that we want to impose stress on them from a physiological standpoint for them to then adapt over time and build some of those adaptations. The same way I would program a deadlift for Fabrizio to build glute, hamstring, and lower back strength is the same way that I would need to adapt for Fabrizio for teaching every single hip hinge and deadlift progression along the continuum.
Yeah, that's a great point to take into account each and every time we go out and train people. So thank you, Matthew. Yeah. Now let's dive into the core of this conversation, pun intended, man. Just to piggyback on a recent post of yours where you were, focusing on the sometimes inflated debate between, bracing core versus coiling core. I mean, what's your take on that? I mean, how should we go about training core?
A great question. I think if we're going to talk about the core, we have to understand the basic fundamentals of the spine. Like, what is the job of your spine? Technically, the job of your spine is to just act as it's your backbone. It is your support structure. However, I think what happens on social media or in our field is movements become demonized. Like, okay, don't bend forward and touch your toes. You put a big red X through it on social. Oh, don't do this. Do this instead. Or don't extend your back and try to reach, do like overhead reaching global extension pattern in your spine because that's going to blow out a disc. Like, we need to take a deep breath and relax with all of these negative connotations because we know that negative language, like for example, right, Fabrizio, if I'm talking to you like coach to coach, we can have certain scientific conversations if we want to. But if I'm talking to an athlete, this goes back to communication. This is what I'm saying. It's all overlaid. So if I say, hey, Fabrizio, don't arch your back like that, your back's it's gonna get pissed off versus, hey, Fabrizio, you can, give it a shot. Try to arch your back like that. See how it feels. How does it feel? It actually feels fine. Okay, great. Like, I wouldn't recommend doing that all the time, but if you have to do it, like, definitely give it a shot and, see how it responds. Start out body weight. If it's okay, maybe stay there. But from a benefit standpoint, you might do better or get more out of doing X, Y, or Z. So, excuse me, I think we have to understand that human movement it's everywhere. So to tell someone not to rotate their spine, bend, like flexion or extension, is what you're doing is you're like limiting them. So, hey, you have a brand new car and you're like, hey, you can only drive at 30 miles an hour, nothing above that. It's a brand new Ferrari. I thought it can go 80 or 90 or 100. Nope, stop at 30. So what you're doing is you're limiting people. So what I'm saying is, from a basic human movement standpoint, it's completely okay to bend at your spine, to extend at your spine, to flex, to rotate, just to go through basic movement patterns. I mean, look at something like the exercise like a cat camel or a cat cow, where you're on quadruped all fours, and you want to extend your spine and flex your spine. That's a spinal hygiene exercise. You're giving mobility to each vertebral disc in the spinal column. Again, we're not loaded though. It's a recovery drill, a warm-up drill, just to give it a little mobility, almost like a feel-good exercise. We're not going to load that with dumbbells, weights. That's just a lower level, spinal or core mobility exercise. So everything has its place. So that's an example where you would want to flex or extend. Another example where it's okay to flex or extend. If I'm taking Fabrizio, I'm taking you through an assessment, I want to see your global flexion, like toe touch pattern, and your global extension pattern. I mean, these are just basic like FMS, assessments, or just basic human movement screens and assessments. I need to see those things. I also need to see, plant your feet down. I'm going to stand behind you. You look forward, and I want you to rotate toward me. Keep your feet planted. So I want to see thoracic or mid-back rotation. I want to see what you have access to. So there you go. Flex, extend, rotate. We need to see those things to see what you have access to before we write a training program. So those are examples where we'd want to see some of those movement patterns of the spine. Whereas the training continuum when it comes to the spine, the core and the low back, this is where we want to build specific qualities, whether it's strength, motor control, whatever. So motor control could be something like a bird dog, like popularized by Dr. Stuart McGill over the years. And, bird dog is great because it's one of those no, that's way too easy. But when you do it correctly, you create tension and irradiation and you really hone in on the trunk stability. It's a great lower level exercise to challenge the core. And this is something I posted about recently. Like, yes, doing bird dogs are awesome. There's so many variations, but if you're getting bored with them and you want to challenge yourself a little bit more, you can load them up with a cable column. So a cable bird dog with a one-arm row, or a dumbbell bench bird dog with one-arm row. And those are on my social media, my YouTube channel, and those are everywhere in the world. So seeing some of those advancing in those can be really helpful because now you're stabilizing. You're taking a motor control and stability, lower level body weight bird dog exercise, increasing the stability demand, thus enhancing the strength quality in the drills. Now it's more strength and stability. So that's an example. And then obviously we have all the classics, like the classic antis. So the anti-extension, anti-flexion, anti-lateral flexion or side bend, anti-rotation. And this is where I would say that the majority of core training should live. Not all. By no means is it I think when we get absolute with things, it's a little too aggressive. I think the majority of your core training should be in the stabilization type stuff. So anti-extension. So I'm going to do some sort of a plank exercise. Again, you and I both know there's a million exercises. I'm just going to give examples. Anti-flexion, the easiest one is like a dumbbell farmer carry, a farmer walk. Pretty straightforward. Or grocery carries, because everyone's in a pandemic now and we get to grocery shopping. Anti-rotation, obviously, input like a pallet press of any nature, or anti-rotation press, whatever you want to call it. And then there's the anti-side bend, which is your traditional side plank variations, or now, because of the new evidence and research, Copenhagen plank exercises, because those are great because they give you the anti-lateral flexion or anti-side bend in addition to some groin, inner thigh adductor strengthening, which we know is so important for providing support for the knee and hip, and because it associates with, it's the neighboring musculature of the hamstring, and you and I both know hamstrings, athletes, we got to keep them healthy. So that's how I look at core training, and obviously context would guide the coaching experience, but in a nutshell, do your lower level motor control drills that allow you to flex, extend, and rotate if it feels good, and then go to your upper level all those 4 strength and stability exercises. Now, keep in mind, if you come into the assessment and I have you do an extension-based spinal pattern or a prone press-up like in yoga, and you're like, Matt, my spine doesn't like when I extend. Okay, great. That's good information. Now what we're going to do is we're going to avoid extension-based exercises for a little bit in terms of your spine. Give it a phase, so a month or 2 phases, so 2 months. See how it feels. See how it responds to all other movement patterns. Over time, you may be able to build the tolerance and capacity to extension. So it's just taking time and gathering information to build context so you can coach and program accordingly.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head there, because sometimes these kinds of debate can get so futile. I mean, bracing core, calling core, at the end of the day, they all have their place on the same continuum. They just place themselves at different stage of that given spectrum. So it's not a matter of either or. It's just to know when to implement one or the other. And speaking of regressions, progressions, are there any benchmarks that you have that you take into account when wanting to progress a given athlete from the sagittal plane? How do you know when somebody is ready to access rotations and things like that?
It's a great question. I think what we like to do at our facility, just as a kind of a general blanket term or way of looking at it, is we want to utilize all movement patterns. So think of it like this, right? I mean, we all know the movement patterns. You have a body, push, pull, vertical, horizontal. You have single leg working lateral. You have bilateral squat, bilateral hip hinge, and all of the core antis, all 4 of them, the anti-family. And then also you have locomotion and sprinting and running and like ambulation, like moving. So in my opinion, we have like, here's your roadmap. We have all of these items on paper. If in your assessment we deem that, Fabrizio doesn't do well with global spinal extension. Okay. We check off that box for the moment until you build a capacity. But generally speaking, if you clear the assessment with no true red flags, we want to train all quality, all movement patterns. But keep in mind, we want to build you up slowly. So in our facility, so Coach T and Luca has seen it, we have a stuffed turtle. And the stuffed turtle is representative of taking the slow approach to training, the slow cook approach to training. Look, I love fried food more than anyone else, but we know that putting chicken in a crock pot tastes just as good. I mean, it's crunchy. So we want to provide a systematic approach to promote more sustainability over time. So what we'll do is we'll program all of the basic movement patterns, and how we program them is important. So, do you use body weight? Do you use lighter load? Do you use different forms of resistance or tension? Do you use tempo work, eccentrics, isometrics? So those are sneaky ways we can help someone who is not really ready to go through the full range of motion yet, to just master positions of the range. Everyone wants to become great at pull-ups, but no one wants to spend time doing some of the lowering portion, the eccentric only portion. So jumping up, lowering down 5 seconds, and then rest. Or just doing isometric at certain positions, like owning patterns. So we think of the exercise as like the steak, the filet mignon, the bone-in ribeye. And then we'll add spices in the form of eccentrics, isometrics, tempo work, controlled patterns. So we just try to make sure that we're giving people all the movements they need, like just human movement patterns, but dosing them inappropriately. Because Fabrizio, how often is it that you're in your office now? If at your gym, I know you would do this, but in your office, you wouldn't like lateral lunge to the right and say, "Yo, coach, I got that email you sent me, bro." You wouldn't do that. So getting out of the sagittal plane, the sagittal is moving forward and backward, like reverse lunge, forward lunge, deadlifts, squats, stuff like that, where it's kind of stationary and you're moving forward and backward, or in reverse rather. But the frontal plane is where you're going side to side, moving laterally, curtsy squat, curtsy lunge, lateral lunge, slide board, lateral lunge, lateral squat, lateral shuffles, cariokas, icky shuffles, skater hops, all these things where you're having to move side to side. And if you think of it, right, think about it, in athletics and actually in sport, like soccer, basketball, baseball, these things, the athletic position, right, the athletic stance where your feet are a little bit wider than hip width apart, you're kind of you have a wide base to support, knees are bent a touch, hips are bent a touch, your trunk is forward lean, your hands are active. We need to have the ability to change directions, like change of direction and agility skills, to turn and go in a direction or to move laterally. Just the same as we need to move forward. I mean, how often in sport, I'm not talking about track and field or, sprinting competition. I'm thinking like in sport, like stealing a base in baseball, right? Turning and having to skate down the ice rink. You're playing offense in soccer, you lose the ball, now you have to chase the other direction. It happens so often in sports, so we need to develop these qualities in the capacity to push off and go, to decelerate, to accelerate, to move laterally and multi-directionally the same way that we move linearly. By no means am I saying skip the linear stuff. No. But we have such a high volume of moving linearly that's kind of already developed to a certain extent. Let's let lateral and multi-directional movement catch up to it, and now we have a nice, beautiful base for athletic development to occur.
Yeah, beautifully put, man. And plus, I think that's some kind of a process that happens organically. So
yes.
You'll know it when you see it. You know when to advance somebody.
Yes.
And we're not just talking about athletes, but average pop clients as well. So
absolutely, yeah.
Well, Matthew, I see you're big on giving tendons and knees some love. So what do you like about landboard squats specifically? I mean, what's the rationale behind the usage of the heel elevation?
Yeah, and so I'll preface that with the talk about tendons. There's a lot of talk in our field, in the literature and the evidence that isometrics are great for providing an analgesic effect or like a feel-good effect or a pump to the area, nutrition to the site. But the whole notion of doing long duration isometric holds is not important. I'm not going to get into that debate. What I will say though is that in some form, programming in isometric work can be beneficial for the tendons. If you look at like the research with the collagen fibers, the cross structures, how they form, there's a body of evidence to talk about how isometrics can be helpful for building strong and durable tendons. The goal of the tendon, as we know, attaches muscle to bone. So we want rigidity in the tendon, but we also want the tendon to be allowed to promote elasticity via the musculotendinous unit. So think of pogo jumps, if you will. And everyone knows when they're a kid, they go on the pogo jump stick thing.
Yeah.
Just doing pogo jumps almost like jumping the jumping rope. If you watch someone jump rope, right? Watch them with the jump rope, and then watch them again, and kind of like use your hands to not see the jump rope, just see them jumping. They're doing a pogo jump.
Yeah.
It's a very low level ballistic effort, tap and go, tap and go, tap and go, tap and go. So what we have to have happen from the Achilles tendon is allow for that rigidity, right? The amortization phase where it's stiffness. There's stiffness, but also there's elasticity that the muscles allow to promote and do.
Yeah.
So you have to bounce, right? And so I notice the heel never touches the ground. So we get the gastroc, the soleus to work and everything, and they support the Achilles tendon. But my point is doing some sort of, and that's more of a ballistic effort, but isometrically, how often do you see someone do a heel raise? No one. That's like stuck in the 80s and 90s because it's bodybuilder work. But we shouldn't be afraid to isolate and really target the calf muscles, the Achilles tendon, the gastroc, the soleus, that whole lower leg complex. So that's one way to look at it. And then with the knees, most people forget there are two tendons that cross the knee joint. There's obviously the quad muscle, the quad tendon, the patella bone, the one that kind of is the middle guy, and then the patella tendon. So both tendons need to be strengthened and provide durability and resilience. You get that with knee flexion based exercises. However, we have to promote some of these isometrics first to build tolerance with knee flexion. Once we've done that, then we can promote further range of motion and flexion, which, like you said, we'll see in something where if you're doing a squat pattern, you can elevate the heels or prop them up. You can prop them up on the wall behind you in a wall sit. You can prop them up on a textbook. A slant board is just a fancy way of doing it. And obviously, you want to go as high as you can over time as you build the skill. But even if you just prop them up like on the heel, the orange slab, like the inline lunges or the inline chops.
Yeah.
Put them up on the orange slab, or like half an inch off the ground.
Yeah.
A very low level way to just prop the heel, and what you'll get is you'll get more knee flexion. And when we know with knee flexion or greater depths of knee flexion, we get more loading on those tendons and the structures in the knee. So we're exposing you to loading those structures, which are important for knee health. Once you've mastered all of those qualities and skills, then you can implement strategies like, so we call it the tall kneel fallback, but in the literature it's called the reverse Nordic. Its naming is not important, but the action is. So, get in a tall kneel position, dig your toes in the ground. We like putting the knees on an ARX pad because it allows the toes to have a better ability to dig into the ground from a starting standpoint. And then you create tension, straight line from the knees to the hips to the shoulders, and then fall back as far as you can and then come forward. So if you look up reverse Nordic or tall kneel fallback, you'll see plenty of examples in the literature. Then once that becomes easy, you can remove the ARX pad. Now let the laces of your feet kiss the ground. So go into plantar flexion of the ankle. Now you can go a little further because you control that range of motion. But this is kind of like a simple way to build it up. What I would do if I'm someone who's like, where do I start? Do wall sits. Most people, they overlook the power of wall sits. I just did a presentation on, using isometrics to improve tendon health gains. I can email you that link so that I put together a nice little kind of a diagram of how to program the sets, the reps, the protocols, the duration. I'll email that to you after you can incorporate that in the slides if you'd like to. But I just think that isometrics are one part to the overall puzzle of performance that people kind of sometimes forget about.
So just to scratch the surface a little bit, how would you fit these kinds of drills in a given session? So like in a superset kind of?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there are many ways you can do it. So the first thought is if someone doesn't do well with knee flexion, like it pisses them off, but you want to build some capacity there, like in your program where you would typically put a bilateral squat, just put in a wall sit. Now, a wall sit could mean many things. Goblet hold, hang hold, body weight, the time is context-based, but you would program in a wall sit based on the amount of knee flexion that's tolerable to them. All right, Fabrizio, goes down as low as possible. That causes a little bit of pain. Okay, great. Back off 10%. How's that feel? That feels fine. Okay, go to that range and hold that range. So don't go to the range where it's pissed off. Go to the range where it's just before that, 10% before that, so we can begin to build tolerance. So we can put it there in the actual strength program. We can load it. We can also do it on a recovery day because we know, for example, eccentrics or eccentric loading, there's a high level of muscle damage and stress to the tissue. So the recovery process is increased. But that's an adaptation we want when we program eccentrics, like in Nordic hamstring eccentric only or slider hamstring eccentric only. Whereas isometrics, they promote an analgesic effect, like a feel-good effect. They also don't damage the muscle tissue as much, which means you can recover much quicker. So we could certainly put isometrics on your active recovery days in between bouts of strength training. You could also implement isometrics, whether, in a small dosage, 1 or 2 exercises in the warm-up or in the recovery. So my answer would be it's really anywhere. It depends what your goal is and what you're trying to achieve from an adaptation standpoint.
Yeah, great stuff, Matt. And I think ISOs are such a powerful tool in our toolbox.
Absolutely,
and more and more research is backing this up. I mean, so
yeah,
Dr.
Keith Barr, B-A-R. He's kind of at the lead or in the front of all this tendon research. So I used a study of his in my presentation, but I'll send you that link so you can see the diagram. But yeah, Dr. Keith Barr, he's fantastic, and he's like one of the leading guys with tendons. He puts out a lot of great information.
And I'll definitely put all of these links in the show notes. So thank you, man.
Perfect. Yeah.
And now switching gears a little bit. I mean, we're all going through some crazy times because of the lockdown and the virus, and more people are leaning towards home workouts. And I mean that's great, but I was curious to know what are some of the movement patterns you see people struggling with the most? What are some of the most butchered exercise you're seeing these days? And on the flip side, how could we make our home workouts safer and more effective?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of butchered exercises, I feel bad saying this because people are just trying to keep healthy and stay strong, and you can't fault them for that. But I think what we're doing is you're seeing a lot of workouts turn into cardio sessions or conditioning sessions or HIIT program, like high intensity interval training, which they're not bad. They have their time and place, but conditioning sessions should not replace strength training and loading sessions. So number one, I would just say, structure your training program out for the week. That's number one. Number two is use tempo. So slow eccentric, slow hold, or slow concentric, and then slow, coming back up. Use tempo or greater time under tension, king tut, to slow things down to build better skills with exercises. And then exercises that you see really performed in such a way that could be better. Something like a split squat, a reverse lunge, a one leg RDL. Usually it's the one leg exercise or the single leg exercise that are really challenging for folks. Yeah. So you see a lot of those kind of butchered, but anything like step ups or stuff like that is tough. Whereas a traditional deadlift or a squat, because it's bilateral, more points of stability, less demand on stability, those are a little bit easier to perform. So you don't see as many mistakes in those exercises.
Yeah, I mean, ISOs, increasing time under tension, refining basic movement technique. I mean, there's always room for improving our technique when it comes to training. So we got plenty of options to devote ourselves to during this time. So Matthew, how are you spending your days? How are you dealing with the lockdown?
I gotta be honest with you. I've kept busy, and I'm lucky that I have a lot of things going on, and I enjoy staying busy and getting things done and working on projects. So this has I'm someone who tries to see the positive. So this has allowed me to rekindle my social media flame, like wanting to put up more social media content, Instagram content, shooting more videos. I'm just trying to provide education and put content out there that is helpful for people. So number one, it's giving me more time to provide education in the form of social media posts, in the form of writing blog articles, whether on our own website or for other websites as, guest articles. It allowed me more time to hop on podcasts like this and interact with people around the world, which I enjoy doing. I've gotten on more, face-to-face video calls or FaceTime sessions with our clients and our athletes, and people around the world who I haven't caught up with in a while. It's also allowed me to, spend more time finishing up the semester as an academic adjunct professor with both schools. But now as we plan for the fall semester, is doing some of that prep work, which, as you know, takes a long time. It's allowed me to spend more time on my PhD coursework. And the biggest thing of all, the most important thing is develop better and stronger relationships with people I haven't done so in the past, family, friends. And so it's just giving me more time to slow things down a bit and just focus on important items in my life that I wasn't given focus to prior to.
And what are you reading at the moment?
I just got, I forget the name of it. It's Nick Winkelman's brand new book.
So you posting that on the gram, right?
So, yeah, Nick Winkelman's brand new book is, and he's someone who, he went to Rocky Mountain University where I'm at for his PhD. I'm there for the PhD as well. And so, I'm reading that. I obviously, I stay up to date with social media content. I read blogs, I read articles. I try to educate myself. And I'm someone who's more of a visual guy, but sitting down to read is not my favorite thing to do, but I know it's important. So I'm digging in a little bit more to the research and literature with hamstring stuff, and just jumped into Nick Winkelman's book. It's great so far. I'm about 20, 30 pages in, and I just think the whole notion of using communication as your guide and proper language and coaching is kind of the future of our field, and it actually makes sense because we should be good communicators if we're going to coach people. So it's almost like we've done this backwards. Like, let's learn all of the science, not talk about the communication. But yeah, man, just digging into that and just trying to stay up to date with current evidence in the field and literature, and still using anecdotal in the trenches evidence and experience.
Feel free to plug anything related to the services you're currently providing.
Yeah, So I'm trying to do a free webinar every Thursday. Last Thursday was about, the positive impact of strength training on high school and college athletes.
Yeah, so that.
This Thursday we're doing, overtraining, right? how to avoid common pitfalls and develop sustainability. Too many people have this, excuse me, apologies, an unorganized, loose approach to training, which is great, and that's fine. You will still get some sort of adaptations to occur, and you'll get generally fit and healthy. However, specific goals, specific programming breeds specific results. So the necessity of having a structured and guided program, having the instruction from a coach if and when needed, and following a progressive strength training program that advances over time, phase to phase, is the best, most simplest approach to achieving results. And, the notion of, well, I feel tired, I worked hard and I'm sweating. We know, well, just anecdotally, but also from the evidence, that is not indicative of progression or achieving results. Sure, it's a byproduct of working out, but in training, it's not what we're after. We're after specific adaptations to impose demands. We're after getting better each time, making a weight the first week feel much easier at a lower RPE or rate of perceived exertion on week 4, end of the phase. So when we have structure, we have a better ability to achieve results. So I can say that link as well. That webinar is free. It's this Thursday night, May 14th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard, but I'll send you that link, and there's going to be a Q&A at the end as well, so it should be fun and it's free. So we'll be doing stuff like that every Thursday, but this one's going down this Thursday, and I'll share that link with you.
Yeah, and what's great about this whole kind of lockdown is that the fitness industry has proved to be cohesive in terms of, sharing huge amounts of content, and, a lot of coaches get out there and put out tons of information. I mean, they shared a lot, so it's all good. It's all good, Matthew.
It's helpful. It's fun. It's good to interact and educate and, provide support and leadership.
So what are some of the best ways we can find you on the internet?
I think the simplest way, Fabrizio, is on Instagram. The reason I say that is because I go on there a lot, and whether it's direct message, whether it's comment on a post, whether it's, wanting to hop on a 15-minute phone call with me, whatever it is, I go there the most, and it's the most accessible. So, and people are on it the most. So I would say just, my name, Matthew Ibrahim _ on Instagram is probably the easiest way to get in contact with me. And I'm someone who I look forward to interacting. So yeah, man, just reach out, and I'm happy to support in any way that I can.
Matthew, thank you so much, man. That was awesome. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this. Really, really appreciate
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah, man. I'm a big fan of FitFam. Love you guys. Love the team. So
likewise,
I appreciate you guys having me on. Yeah, it's been fun, and I look forward to future collaborations.